truly committed to civil rights in the beginning.
Dr. King, Carl Rowan, our former ambassador to Finland, has said that your statements against Negro participation in the war have, and I quote, alienated many of the Negro's friends and armed the Negro's foes. What is your comment on that statement?
Well, I'm sorry to have to disagree very vigorously with Mr. Rowan on that. I go back to the same statement that people who have been alienated as a result of this stand against the war were alienated anyway. Many people supported us in civil rights when we were in Selma, Birmingham, because they were against the brutality of a Bull Connor, Jim Clark, and they were deeply outraged about these things. And they supported us because they were against that brutality, not because they were for genuine equality for the Negro. And if anybody's been alienated, it's been because they were really not absolutely committed to the ideal of genuine equality for the Negro, and any little excuse that comes along, they will use that. But the basic thing is that they were not committed anyway.
This equality for the Negro that you mentioned, how much longer are the Negro people willing to wait for this equality, which is certainly due them?
Well, the mood in the Negro community, as you know, is a mood of great disappointment and despair and even bitterness as a result of the slow pace of progress and as a result of the fact that in some instances things have gotten worse, particularly in the economic area. And I think the impatience is very deep and the discontent is very broad. And if something isn't done with haste to remove the intolerable conditions that exist in our communities all over the nation, then I see us sinking into darker nights of social disruption.
Doctor, do you believe that your remarks have put a strain on the relations of the civil rights movement? Do you believe so?
Well, not really. As I said, many people, white and Negro, are deeply opposed to the war in Vietnam. Interestingly enough, when I first spoke out against the war, only 21% of the American people were against it. Both the Gallup and the Harris polls reveal now that the majority of Americans are against the war in Vietnam. Some 48% are now opposed to the war in Vietnam. 10% remain undecided. And you have about 42% who are still in favor. So you have a majority opposed to the war in Vietnam. And I haven't seen the great opposition to my position that so many people would state. The other thing is that a man of conscience can never be a consensus leader. He doesn't take a stand in order to search for consensus. He's ultimately a molder of consensus. And I've always said that the ultimate measure of a man is not where he stands in moments of comfort and moments of convenience, but where he stands in moments of challenge and moments of controversy. And I would take this position even if I didn't have a majority of people agreeing with me now.
Using your feeling about unilateral and the way France settled, which was very well done, they didn't lose face. Apparently, face is the important thing at this time. But not only are we losing face, but it would be better to save lives. We know that. Who will be the GOAT if someone takes upon themselves to end this war and settle it unilaterally? Will there be a constant complaint, what a big waste this was? Will this set a precedent for the United States in the future of defending our inheritance, our independence?
Well, I think we have to look at several things here. First, in my mind, peace is much more important than face. And I think there has to be a transformation here in terms of our thinking and in terms of peace. We've got to come to see now that peace must not only be a goal that we talk about and seek, but a means by which we arrive at that goal. The other thing is this, that even though the mood of the country may not be in line with the unilateral withdrawal now, I think there are things that can be done to bring about a negotiated settlement. Now, there are many people who have talked very closely with the leaders of North Vietnam and the National Liberation Front, who tell us if we bring about an unconditional halt in the bombings, this would get talks going. Our government has refused to do that. And I feel that since we took the initiative in escalating the war in the air and on the land and on the seas, then we have a moral obligation to take the initiative to de-escalate it, and I think we can do that by bringing about a halt to the bombings. And our security
do you think that would do it, by halting the bombing? Would that do it?
Well, as I
Would that
said,
bring about talks?
I can only go by men like you, Taunt, the Russian leaders, and many other people who have talked very closely with the leadership of North Vietnam and the National Liberation Front. I think we ought to try it anyway. I think we ought to bring about an unconditional halt to the bombings, and we should do that for practical reasons in terms of trying to get talks started, and I think we should do it for moral reasons. They are never going to negotiate as long as we're bombing that territory.
How about your relationship with President Johnson? Have you lost favor with Mr. Johnson?
Well, I guess the president would have to answer that question. I have taken a position against the administration's policy, and I would hope that the president means what he says when he says that there should always be room for dissent. And we come to a tragic period in our nation when we equate dissent with disloyalty. I believe firmly that it is necessary to have these moments of dissent in order to challenge something that may be leading the whole nation down the wrong path.
Do you care if you have lost favor with Mr. Johnson?
Well, that isn't, I guess, the most important thing to me. The important thing is that I not lose favor with truth and with what conscience tells me is right and what conscience tells me is just. I'm much more concerned about keeping favor with these principles than keeping favor with a person who may misunderstand the position I take.
We will talk further with Dr. Martin Luther King following these messages. We'll be right back.